The city skyline was painted in hues of twilight on a bustling urban street. The cacophony of honking horns and distant chatter sets the scene, transitioning to a frazzled woman, Sophie, standing on the curb. Her face is pale, a hand clutching her visibly swollen belly as she gasps in discomfort. Sophie is around 8 months pregnant and struggling to maintain her composure. She waves desperately at a taxi approaching from the distance, only to have it slow down and roll to a stop. The driver, Eric, glances at her through the rearview mirror. He's a gruff man in his 50s, weary from years of driving. Hospital? I'm in labor, Sophie pleads, her voice trembling with urgency. Eric hesitates, his eyes darting to the time on the dashboard. Sorry, lady. Can't do it. Too risky for me if something goes wrong. Liability, you know, he mutters, shifting the car into gear. Before we continue with this true life story, please hit the subscribe button to show your support to this channel. And do not forget to turn on the notification bell. Thank you. Sophie is stunned, tears welling up as the taxi speeds off, leaving her stranded. A few bystanders glance her way but offer no help. The intensity of her contractions increases, and she doubles over in pain. Just then, another figure emerges from the shadows, a young man named Ryan, wearing a worn-out jacket and holding a bag of groceries. He's in his early 30s, kind-eyed but clearly someone who's been through tough times. Are you okay? Ryan asks, rushing to her side. No, I'm not. Sophie snaps, but her frustration quickly melts into desperation. I need to get to the hospital. Please, can you help me? Ryan's face hardens with determination. Hang on. He looks around for a solution and spots an old sedan parked nearby. Bystanders watched in amazement as Ryan is seen desperately explaining to Mrs. Patel, the car's elderly owner, why he needs her vehicle. Mrs. Patel is skeptical at first but relents when she sees Sophie's condition. Take care of her, she says, handing Ryan the keys. Ryan quickly threw the bag of groceries on the floor of the back seat and started to help Sophie into the back seat of the car, her groans filling the car as Ryan navigates through the chaotic traffic. The beads of sweat on his forehead says a lot as he weaves through lanes. My name is Ryan, and I'm going as fast as I can, Ryan assures Sophie, who clutches the seat in pain. I am Sophie, she mentioned her name to Ryan as she cries out loud in anguish. The car is suddenly cut off by another driver, causing Ryan to slam on the brakes. The groceries spill out of his bag, revealing cans of food and a handwritten note addressed to a homeless shelter. Sophie notices but says nothing, too overwhelmed by her contractions. As they near the hospital, a police car pulls them over. A tense exchange ensues as Officer James questions Ryan, suspecting the car might be stolen. Sophie, struggling to breathe, screams, I'm having a baby, for God's sake. The officer, startled, quickly escorts them to the hospital instead of further interrogation. Inside, nurses swarm around Sophie, and Ryan is left in the waiting room, his hands trembling. Ryan is a former mechanic who had fallen on hard times. He once ran a successful repair shop but lost it after a series of financial setbacks, including mounting debts from his late wife's medical bills. He had lost his wife and unborn child in a tragic accident years ago. His wife, Emily, passed away at the hospital with her 20 weeks pregnancy. The doctors couldn't save her and their unborn baby, leaving Ryan devastated and with no family to turn to. Without a home or steady income, Ryan became transient, taking odd jobs and relying on shelters for food and temporary lodging. On the day Sophie went into labor, Ryan happened to be in the area, having just completed some grocery shopping for a local homeless shelter where he frequently volunteered. His familiarity with the neighborhood was limited, but he often helped the elderly residents nearby with small repairs in exchange for a meal or a few dollars. The elderly woman, Mrs. Patel, whose car Ryan borrowed, was someone he had helped before. She trusted him because he had once fixed her broken heater for free during a bitter winter. That trust was evident when she handed over her car keys without hesitation after seeing Sophie's condition. Mrs. Patel chose not to accompany them to the hospital because she relied on Ryan to return the car. "You've always done right by me, Ryan. Just make sure that young lady gets the help she needs," she said firmly before retreating to her home. Ryan promised to bring the car back immediately after ensuring Sophie's safety. So, this moment feels like a second chance to him, though he keeps his emotions tightly controlled. Once at the hospital, Ryan stayed long enough to see Sophie and her baby were okay. Hours pass. A nurse approaches Ryan to inform him that both Sophie and her baby are doing fine. Sophie asks to see him, and when he enters her room, the gratitude in her eyes is palpable. "You saved us," Sophie says, her voice thick with emotion. "It is our first baby after 4 miscarriages. There were bystanders who didn't help, and the taxi driver sped off leaving me stranded, but you came to my aid. Thank you, Ryan," she said. "It was the right thing to do," Ryan replies, brushing off the praise. An unexpected turn of event happened when Sophie hands him an envelope. "This is for you," she says, revealing a significant amount of money inside. Ryan is taken aback and refuses. "I didn't do it for a reward." Sophie insists, explaining that she's not just a pregnant woman, she's the CEO of a major company and wants to help him rebuild his life. Ryan is overwhelmed but still hesitant to accept. Sophie pleaded with Ryan to leave his contact behind. With Sophie's assurance that she'd cover any legal complications regarding the car if needed, Ryan drove the car back to Mrs. Patel. Mrs. Patel was waiting anxiously on her porch when he arrived. "What happened? Is she all right?" Mrs. Patel asked, clutching her shawl. "She's fine, and so is her baby," Ryan replied, handing her the keys. His tone was a mix of relief and exhaustion. "Thank you for trusting me." Mrs. Patel smiled warmly, patting his arm. "You've got a good heart, Ryan. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." After returning the car, Ryan went back to the hospital, unwilling to leave Sophie completely alone. He wanted to make sure she had everything she needed, even though he felt out of place in the sterile, brightly lit corridors. That's when he had a chance encounter with Sophie's husband, Daniel, who had arrived after a frantic call from the hospital. Daniel initially eyed Ryan suspiciously, but after Sophie explained what had happened, Daniel extended his hand. "Thank you. I don't know how we'll ever repay you." Ryan brushed it off, saying it was simply the right thing to do. He shared little about his own struggles, but hinted at his past. "I couldn't save my wife or our child, but today, I could help someone else. That's enough for me." Later, when Sophie and Daniel insisted on giving Ryan money, he was hesitant but ultimately accepted a smaller portion of what she offered, enough to help him get back on his feet. Sophie also recommended Ryan to a contact in her company who needed a trustworthy mechanic. Weeks later, Ryan is seen volunteering at the homeless shelter where he used to receive help. Meanwhile, the financial assistance given to Ryan by Daniel and Sophie, with the contacts from Sophie's company, led to him slowly rebuilding his life, starting with a stable job as a mechanic and eventually moving into his own apartment. Months later, in one of the days when Ryan was volunteering at the shelter, Sophie visits with her baby, now healthy and thriving. She named her baby Hope, in honor of the second chance she felt life had given her. Sophie's family had also grown close to Ryan, inviting him over for holidays and gatherings, treating him like extended family. Together, they form an unlikely friendship, each having profoundly impacted the other's life. 2 years had passed. Ryan now owns his own mechanic repair shop. Ryan is seen standing outside his new repair shop, gazing at the sign that reads Ryan's Garage, where kindness drives us forward. A young boy approaches him with his bike, asking for help with a broken chain. Ryan smiled at him, kneels to fix it, his hand steady and purposeful. Meanwhile, Ryan's shop is situated in the same location where Mrs. Patel and his other customers lived. When he got a shop space in that location, he was very glad he did, since he had worked around that location for years and he is very familiar with the area. While Ryan was fixing the young boy's bike, a man drove his car in and parked in front of Ryan's shop. It was the taxi driver Eric, who had abandoned Sophie when she was in labor a few years ago. He had come to fix his car. The taxi driver was looking exhausted and tattered, as if there's so much going on in his life at the time. Ryan fixed the bike and gave it to the young boy, who was very excited. As he turned to check the car, Eric confided in Ryan, letting him know that he had just come to seek for his help. "I do not have anything on me right now to pay you, but I will surely come back to pay you after our work for some time. Please, fix my car." The man, Eric, had lost his wife during labor when she was about to have their third child. The baby survived, but his wife didn't make it. He had been in debt following a massive hospital bills he had to pay. He is also taking care of his children by himself. Ryan didn't know him to be the taxi driver who had left Sophie in her pain, but decided to help him as he was deeply touched by his story. While the taxi driver failed Sophie in her time of need, Ryan didn't need to fail him in return, even though he didn't know that he was the driver. Ryan is that kind of man with a good and large heart. Sometimes, it's not about where you're going, but who you help along the way. This is the message of hope that Ryan reflects on daily that makes him the better man he continues to be. We all have a moral obligation as humans to let our first instinct be to help when we find people in desperate need or in any life-threatening condition. Call for help, call an ambulance, render assistance, just do something to save a life today. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to Home of Stories TV. And do not forget to turn on the notification bell for more inspiring videos. Drop your comments below, let us know your thoughts.